Hi, my name is Helium Fusion, and this is How is a Planetary Nebula Formed? So a planetary nebula is a stage of a star's death. Generally, stars that are bigger than 8 times the mass of our sun will die in a violent supernova, so they don't actually have this stage. But what happens to stars like our sun or anything along the masses of our sun? So if you have 8 solar masses or less, you will become a planetary nebula at some point. So how do you become this? So the first thing is that in a star, your nuclear reaction is hydrogen fusion for most of them. So first you start with hydrogen fusion. And this process is that you take 4 hydrogen atoms and turn one into 1 helium atom. Okay, so now you have this hydrogen fusion and you are supporting all of this helium. So what happens when you run out of fusion? Run out of hydrogen? So the next thing that happens is that your core will start to collapse on its own gravity. So you get core collapse. And little by little, the shell outside the core will start to expand. And as this starts to expand, it will start to cool down. Therefore, you have a really hot core that's compressing and a really cooling shell. So what happens when you start increasing the temperature in the core? So once you increase and compress all that helium, you can begin the helium fusion process. So the next layer is that you have helium fusion. Then you also have a layer of hydrogen fusion. And then you still have this expanding outer shell. The helium fusion will continue until that shell pretty much stops expanding. So what happens next? You have helium fusion turning the core into carbon. So here you have a carbon core. And then you have a helium fusion layer with a cooler layer on top, fusing hydrogen, and an expanding shell. Well, it turns out that helium is very unstable, and fusing helium turns into these giant oscillations that travel to the star. And occasionally these oscillations pile up, and you build up these giant pulsations that launches the entire outer shell out into space. So a planetary nebula is when you end up with a carbon core, exposed with nothing on top of it, and a giant cloud of diffused gases that is ionized, and it looks like it's glowing. And this is how a planetary nebula is formed. My name is Helium Fusion.